Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Rich Blint. I'm the Associate Director of the Office of Community Outreach and Education in the School of the Arts at Columbia University. It's my absolute pleasure to be here to introduce this this mid-afternoon panel, Achieving Our Country, James Baldwin and American Morality. This is presented as part of the Year of James Baldwin, a celebration or partnership of Harlem Stage, Columbia University School of the Arts, and New York Live Arts in celebration of the author, essayist, and activist's 90th year. Today we're joined by some esteemed, distinguished panelists, and I'm just going to introduce them very briefly before I introduce our moderator. Jonathan Holloway is a professor and dean of Yale College. He's the author of a number of volumes, most recently, Jim Crow Wisdom, Memory and Identity in Black America since 1940. We're also joined by Marcus Hunter. Marcus Hunter holds courtesy appointments in African American Studies at Yale, but also is professor in sociology. He'll be joining the department at UCLA this fall, right, Marcus? He is the author of the phenomenal book, I say that because I've read it, Black City Makers, How the Philadelphia Negro Changed Urban America, from Oxford University Press. Walter Mosley is here, the phenomenal novelist, whose books, I was just about to say whose books are too numerous to mention. He doesn't need an introduction. So we're going to go right along to the wonderful, brilliant, delightful Imani Perry, who is the author of two major books, More Beautiful and More Terrible, The Embrace and Transcendence of Racial Inequality in the United States, and Prophets of the Hood, Politics and Poetics in Hip Hop, and numerous articles and book reviews. Finally, and not least at all, is Claudia Roth-Pierpoint, staff writer for The New Yorker, who is the author of, most recently, Roth Unbound, and he's unbound in that text, a writer in his books, and a staff writer, like I mentioned, at The New Yorker. Our moderator this evening is my generous and brilliant colleague, Kendall Thomas, sitting right here to my right. Kendall is the co-founder and director of the Center for Law and Culture at Columbia University School of Law. He's also the Nash Professor of Law at Columbia. Please welcome Kendall Thomas.
Thank you, Rich, and thank you so much for your vision in organizing this year of the Harlem Book Fair on the great James Baldwin. James Baldwin, as you all know, was a son of Harlem, and it is so fitting that James Baldwin provides the inspiration for our discussion this afternoon of James Baldwin and American morality. We have with us a stellar collection. I would call them a dream team. I could not have come up with a better staff of panelists to discuss the question of Baldwin and American morality than the one you see before you. And I hope that you're as excited as I am at the conversation we're about to have. My job is a very easy one. I get to ask the questions. Theirs is a hard one because they have to offer, if not answers, responses to questions that are suggested by this extraordinarily powerful topic and by the life, work, and example of the great James Baldwin himself. So we'll start with an obvious question, and that is this. Is there an American morality? And if there is an American morality, what is the nature of American morality? Perhaps I should start with you, Claudia.
Well, is this okay, sound-wise? I certainly think there's an American desire for a morality, an American sense of itself as having a morality, which always seems to be, however, a little bit ahead of us in getting achieved. It's been tragic, the lack of achievement, for considering what we were on paper over a very long period of time, but I wouldn't say that there's not an American morality. I think Baldwin thought there was, or could be, an American reality. I think American morality. I think the title given to this very panel, Achieving Our Country, was very important to him. He thought that could be done. Unfortunately, it wasn't done in his lifetime. Died in 1987 at 63, and he was very bitter about having put in more than 60 years with promises unfulfilled. Yet, in a way, he never gave up. And I think Achieving Our Country, as everyone knows from The Fire Next Time, which for all its warnings and dire predictions about what could happen when and if this nation didn't come to terms with its racial problem, he did say that if we come together, I think to paraphrase it, it's the more conscious whites and the more conscious blacks, and together we can help create consciousness in these others. And if we can do that, and he actually uses the term like lovers, if we can do that like lovers, we will get somewhere. We will end the racial nightmare, and we will achieve our country. And he says achieve something that has never quite existed before. It's something that takes more, unfortunately, more than a lifetime or 2 lifetimes. But I think little by little, with a lot of pushback, you see more rights being accorded. You see, you see self-interest challenged and beating back against morality. But it's present, and it's hard, and it's bitter, and it's a fight and a constant struggle. But if you don't believe that it can happen, I think Baldwin felt you were lost. You had to believe it could happen if you just, not in his lifetime, maybe in his nephew's, and not to say that there isn't rage about what hadn't happened and what did happen to him, but you have to keep pushing. You have to believe it's possible, or you fall into despair, and for him that was the worst thing that could happen to you.
Walter Mosley, is there an American morality?
I hope not. That sounds awful. You know, really, I mean, just the question sounds awful. I mean, because, you know, like, if you had one morality, you know, lots of people would be in trouble, you know, because we don't all fit in the same cast. I mean, you have someone like Baldwin. Baldwin's one of the few writers of his time who is like equivalent to a jazz musician, meaning to say that he's head and shoulders above the rest of the culture of America. And so the way he thought, the way he saw the world, you know, rather than being biracial, he's kind of bicultural, being black and gay. He understood a world, a possibility of freedom that we could have, in which we might think and feel different kinds of things. But, you know, the idea of having a solitary morality sounds kind of fascist, you know, and you know, and you know, like, your morality depends on where you're coming from. You know, if you're coming from if you're a child who's been through a prison-like school system and then ends up going to a prison, you know, your morality is like, you know, I don't snitch, and, you know, I hit back whoever hits me, because that's it. You know, you might be, you know, raised in, you know, some, you know, kind of middle-class community in New Jersey where, you know, that kind of notion, you know, is just, you know, counterproductive. You know, I mean, and just sexuality alone, you know, like, because a lot of times morality is applied to sexuality, and so, like, you know, then you have people like, you know, Langston Hughes and James Baldwin and many others who have that part of their life has to be. You know, I remember when I was 7 at Victory Baptist Day School in Los Angeles, but it's not in the neighborhood you're living in. I remember Victory Baptist Day School had a church, and we all had to go to the church, you know, and I was very, you know, didn't want to go. And on every seat there was you know, The Fire Next Time, you know, and Baldwin came to address us, and it was so wonderful, because there was a sense of transcendence. You know, the words and the arguments were all good and well, but there was a sense of transcendence that we all had to gesture toward, but we were going to get different places. That's how it felt, and that's how I think about it. You know.
Imani Perry, is there an American morality?
So I think there